Hi, 4th grade. We are ready for chapter 26 of the Aurora County All-Stars. Let's see what happens. This chapter starts off with a quote by Frank Robinson, outfielder of the Baltimore Orioles. "I don't see why you reporters keep confusing Brooks, Robinson, and me. Can't you see that we wear different numbers?" Okay, here we go. "Oh my golly, Uncle Jim Bob, what are you doing here so soon?" Finesse fell into Dr. Dan Deaver's enormous embrace. "Your stage doesn't fit the schoolhouse," boomed Dr. Dan. "I've come to supervise and to partake of a much-needed vacation." He took Finesse by the shoulders, lifted her off her feet, and kissed her right in the middle of her forehead. "I see your pageant is morphing into a very interesting amalgamation." Finesse began a real boo-hoo that could be heard all up and down Main Street. Dr. Dan ushered her inside the barber shop, and House followed them. "I'd better get everybody," said Melba. "Don't say anything important until I get back." She ran toward the ball field with her clipboard in her hands. The ball players and the rest of the pageant players practically ran over Melba Jane as they raced past her in the opposite direction and flooded into the barber shop. Melba got herself turned back around and joined them. Pip was not there, but his second-in-command, Mr. Lamar Lackey, stopped his scissors in mid-clip so he could figure out the commotion. Hampton Hawes was startled awake from where he was snoring in his barber chair, waiting for another customer. Amid the smells of shaving lotion and the sounds of Finesse's sobs, the whole story was related. Word had gotten round that Dr. Dan Deavers had been spotted at Schatz' barber shop, and a crowd began gathering from as far away as Raleigh. Even some redbugs were there with their mamas, all sardined into the barber shop or spilling onto the sidewalk, listening to the saga and sneaking a peek at Dr. Dan. "It's the best combination of artistic vision and athletic prowess I ever heard," said Dr. Dan/Jim Bob, casting an admiring look in House's direction. "I salute you, young House. How did you come up with such a brilliant solution to our dilemma?" House opened his mouth, shut it, and shrugged. He waited for some kid to tell on him, to tell the whole town that he'd been helping Norwood Boyd cook kids, that he was nothing more than a monster himself. But of course no kid would say that in front of a grown-up. No one uttered a peep except for Dr. Dan, who seemed to delight in his own oratory. "I am a baseball fan of the highest order," he boomed. "Baseball is an art, a drama, a ballet without music. Let us give it a Greek chorus." Everyone in the barber shop smiled good manners smiles and wondered what the heck that meant. Dr. Dan was happy to explain. "It's a brilliant solution to combine the game and the pageant, yes, but it will never work unless we go all out. I have learned that when one is presented with an opportunity to become more than oneself, one always takes that opportunity gratefully. One acknowledges all others of assistance and embraces the larger field, so to speak, of possibility. Let's do it. Let's plan and practice the pageant and the ball game together. We can move part of the stage to the empty lot temporarily as well. It won't fit in the schoolhouse right now, so we'll make good use of it on the field. Voila! A problem turned into a possibility." "Voila!" Finesse beamed. Her uncle was the most handsome, most dashing, most capable man she had ever met. He had coffee bean skin that glowed right along with his smile and a bushy mustache that was tinged with gray. He smelled like oranges. His enthusiasm was infectious. "A lot of people are going to think we are a shocking pair," said Dr. Dan, "but baseball lends itself perfectly to pageantry. This is just what we need, a little drama, a bit of a shake-up in our routines. Is there anyone here from Smith County?" Several Smith County mamas raised their hands. "Will you take this proposal back to your ball players and make sure we have their complete cooperation?" They nodded their heads, glancing sideways at one another, their smiles intact. "Who will step up to the plate to assist us?" asked Dr. Dan. Inspired, people fell all over themselves in their desire to help. "I'll mow the ball field in the empty lot," chimed old Johnny Mercer, who dug the graves at the Snapfinger Cemetery for the Snowburgers' funeral home empire. We'll move the stage, volunteered Woodrow Pete Wilson, and several of the papas who were thrilled there was going to be a game. I'll starch and press the uniforms, said Mary Wilson. She stood at the back of the crowd with Leonard Jackson. My machine's back in business, and so am I. Sunshine Laundry, send us your sheets. Under new management, we can't be beat. Where's Clebo? Clebo had not arrived with the other kids. He quit, cried Ned and Boone. We'll just see about that, said Mary Wilson. Make way. She stomped out of the barber shop. Where's Honey? Asked Leonard Jackson. She went home with Ruby, said Evan Evans. Mary Wilson pried her way back into the barber shop, leading Clebo by the ear. Coming through, she said as she snaked toward Finesse and House. Steam rose from her like she was a pressing machine herself. The look on Clebo's face was a mixture of pain and fury. This boy will play, Mary Wilson stated in a menacing voice. He will dance, he will sing. She stopped herself as Dr. Dan stood tall right in front of her. Her eyes traveled up and up until they reached Dr. Dan's eyes. Then her face softened and her voice took on an immediate sweetness. Have you met my son, Clebo? Clebo H.W. Wilson. She let go of Clebo's ear, dusted him off, straightened his t-shirt, and shoved him in front of Dr. Dan. Clebo looked like a mute, deranged dog. Dr. Dan stuck out his enormous hand and shook Clebo's smaller one. Good to meet such an upstanding, cooperative young man. Clebo blinked into Dr. Dan's dark eyes. Yes, sir, he mumbled. He cast a sideways look at House, who looked away. And you all know my niece Frances. Dr. Dan hoisted Finesse onto a barber chair, the very same barber chair she'd collided with during her interpretive dance when House's elbow was broken. She balanced herself daintily, standing on the seat of the chair, and gave a small bow. Finesse, s'il vous plaît, she sang. My name is now Finesse. I believe that's the name of a shampoo, whispered Lamar Lackey, still holding his scissors. Finesse has more talent in her little finger than I have in my entire body, Dr. Dan orated. Miss Maddie appeared at the edge of the crowd. How much talent does it take to lie in bed in a coma on television for the past month? But she smiled when she said it. She liked Dr. Dan. She had missed him. Everybody had. Dr. Dan gave Miss Maddie a bear hug. It takes great talent to figure out how to get out of work long enough for a good vacation, Maddie, he boomed. So here I am, coma and all. Well, it's about time, said a voice from the door of the shop. Like the Red Sea parting, a path was opened, and through it walked Pip. James, he said to his grown grandson, Jim Bob, the famous soap opera actor, Dr. Dan Beavers. Poppy, said Dr. Dan, tears in his eyes at the sight of his grandfather. I'm home. Okay, 4th grade. That is the end of this chapter, but there's an Aurora County news article, so I'm going to go ahead and read the news article, and then we'll talk about this whole chapter. Regular edition, June 19th, the Aurora County News. Murmurs from Mabel, by Phoebe Scoop Tolbert. As my faithful readers know, I have sworn to deliver the local news just as soon as it breaks all over Aurora County. Somehow, even with my reporting skills at their prime, I was scooped. The death of Mr. Norwood Reinhardt Bogard Boyd was reported in this paper by Comfort Snowburger of Snowburger's Funeral Home. One can perhaps forgive the funeral home for wanting to be the first to report this major event, but I would just like to point out that the protocols and etiquettes of the newspaper business call for fair reportage to all sources as soon as a story is leaked. Please put me back in the loop, Snowburgers. On to Mr. Norwood Boyd, who, as readers now know, died this past week at the ripe old age of 88. Not that old. Mr. Tolbert is approaching that age himself. He remembers going to school with Norwood, but of course I don't, as I am much younger than Mr. Tolbert. Norwood had a long and industrious career in the U.S. Merchant Marines. He started his life in Mabel at a time when there were no telephones or toilets in every home. He was known, even as a child, for being a principled person, a man who stood for what he believed in, sometimes at great cost to himself. He was a shining example to us all. One thing Norwood believed in was people. He brought people together, even after his illness forced him indoors where he could no longer be active. His correspondence was the stuff of legend. Dot Land has had to order an extra mail crate to hold all the mail that has arrived for Norwood just since his death. He was in touch with people from all walks of life, from all his travels, and he championed the human spirit. Now, there are those who would say Norwood was a recluse. He was. There were rumors of a long-lost love. Who knows? What is true is that Norwood Boyd gave himself permission to stay home for the rest of his life. That was his right. He leaves behind no immediate family, although he is survived by dear friend Parting Shots and his granddaughter Gladys Knight Shots and her daughter Frances Ballard Shots. He was preceded in death by dear friend Joseph Jefferson Jackson of Greenville, South Carolina, and Joe's great-great-niece Elizabeth Jackson, maiden and married name, of Mabel, who was also Norwood's goddaughter. As was reported by Snowburgers, there will be no funeral. However, in related news, rumor has it that the Aurora County All-Stars will play on July 4th. Those of you old enough to remember Norwood as a boy who will understand that there could be no more appropriate memorial to Norwood Boyd than a baseball game. Play ball. 4th grade. We just learned something crazy! Okay, wow, that was a lot. It sounds like they're having the ball game, they're having the pageant. Things are looking up. There's less conflict and more harmony. Things are still not resolved with between Clebo and House, but a lot happened in chapter 26. So I just want to reread this again. He was preceded in death by dear friend Joseph Jefferson Jackson of Greenville, South Carolina, and Joe's great-great-niece, Elizabeth Jackson of Mabel, who was also Norwood's goddaughter. Okay, we just figured out how House's mom knew Norwood Boyd. So, his friend, Joe, had a niece, a great-great-niece, Elizabeth Jackson, and Elizabeth Jackson is House's mom. So, maybe you already put all that together, but I just wanted to make sure I went ahead and said it outright so it's really clear to you that Norwood Boyd was House's mom's godfather. So, House's mom's great-uncle was a really good friend of Norwood Boyd. So it sounds like they were quite close. And all of this has been published in the newspaper, so now House knows about it, and everyone in town knows about it. I also want to kind of comment on the barbershop scene. So 4th grade in class, when we were still reading this book face-to-face in person, we talked a lot about how we could tell that Mabel is a small town. Mabel is the town where the story takes place. We've talked a lot about how the way the book is written really gives us a sense that it's a very tight-knit community. The fact that everyone in town is packed into the barbershop because a soap opera star is there, again, just shows you how small things are, right? He is someone who's on television, but it sounds like Dr. Dan is a really big deal, especially because this town is such a tiny place, okay? So everybody's kind of in the know. Everybody's hearing all this news for the first time, that Dr. Dan is in town, and that they're going to do the pageant, and they're going to do the game, and they're somehow going to figure it out. And now Pip just showed up. So a lot of things are starting to come together right now. So the author is really tying up some of the loose ends of how is this going to work? Are the kids going to do the pageant? Are they going to do the game? Now it's starting to come to a focal point, and we can kind of see where things are headed a little bit more clearly. Okay, so we are at the end of chapter 26. We've read the news briefing. Next up, we'll do chapter 27. And until then, have a wonderful day. Bye.